I went through betrayal, too. Only in my case, it was worse. Like they say, trouble never comes alone. And mine showed up with a whole crew, carrying an entire bouquet of disasters. It all started back in school. We had our own tight-knit group of friends. We were inseparable, me, my wife Sarah, and a few others, including two people we'd grown so close to that they practically felt like family. Their names were Dennis and Lucy. We all grew up together, went through school, college, even the army, and then life happened. We got married, started our lives, but we still stayed close. It felt like nothing would ever break that bond. Sarah and I were one family, Dennis and Lucy, the other. We became this extended family that shared everything: weekends, holidays, the highs and lows of life. If I was ever in trouble, Dennis was there. If Sarah needed someone, Lucy was always just a phone call away. It was that kind of friendship, the kind where you don't even question loyalty, because it's so deep-rooted, you think nothing could ever change it. But oh, how wrong I was. Looking back, the signs were probably there, though I was too blind, or maybe too trusting, to see them. The late-night texts Sarah started getting from Lucy, at first, I thought nothing of them. They were best friends, after all. And Dennis? He was like a brother to me. We shared beers, stories, everything. I had no reason to suspect anything. But then, gradually, things started shifting. There were little things, strange glances, hushed conversations when I entered the room. Sarah began to seem distant. When I asked, she brushed it off, saying she was just tired, overwhelmed with work. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? I trusted her completely. And Lucy? She seemed to be there for her more than ever, making excuses for Sarah when she couldn't show up for plans, telling me not to worry. But one day, everything unraveled. It was like someone yanked the rug out from under my feet, and I hit the ground hard. I remember the day vividly. It was supposed to be just another dinner, just the four of us. But Dennis didn't show up. It was just Lucy, sitting there, looking uncomfortable, picking at her food. And then, out of nowhere, she broke down. Tears, shaking hands, and then the truth came spilling out like a flood I couldn't stop. Sarah had been having an affair. Not with some random guy from her office, not with a stranger, but with Dennis, my best friend, the man I had trusted with everything. The man who had been like a brother to me had been sneaking around with my wife for God knows how long. Lucy? She had found out months ago. That's why she'd been acting so weird. She didn't know how to tell me, didn't want to break our friendship, didn't want to destroy the lives we had all built together. But eventually, it got too much for her. And sitting there, she told me everything. Every ugly detail. I felt like I was punched in the gut. I couldn't breathe. Everything I had built, every relationship I held dear, was crumbling before my eyes. I didn't know who to be more angry with, Sarah, for betraying me, or Dennis, for doing this to me behind my back. The betrayal wasn't just a crack in my marriage. It shattered the foundation of years of friendship. I couldn't even look at Sarah when I got home. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. She cried. She begged for forgiveness. But how could I forgive something like that? How do you come back from being stabbed in the back by not one, but two people you love and trust the most? I spent days in shock, trying to process everything, replaying moments in my head, wondering how I could have missed it, how I could have been so blind. And Dennis? He had the nerve to show up at my door, trying to explain, trying to say it was a mistake, that it didn't mean anything. But all I could see was betrayal written all over his face. My best friend, the one who knew me better than anyone, had destroyed the very core of my life. That was the end of it. Our friendship, our families, everything we once shared. It all crumbled in one night. And I was left standing there, holding the pieces of a life I no longer recognized. My wife, Sarah, and Dennis started their affair right under my nose. They carried it on for an entire year, all while lying to me and to Lucy, his wife. It's incredible how you can live with someone, share every day with them, and still be completely blind to what's going on behind your back. The truth, of course, always finds a way to surface, no matter how well it's buried. I remember when it all came out. It was like the ground beneath me shifted. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about Sarah, about Dennis, shattered. They had been meeting in secret, sneaking around while I was busy working to support our family, and I had no idea. The betrayal felt endless. They didn't just betray us once, they did it every single day for a year. Every lie, every excuse, it all added up to one giant, festering wound. What hit me hardest was that this wasn't just some fling. It was something they'd carried on, while pretending everything was normal. They watched me struggle, work, take care of our daughter while they indulged in their little secret. And what made it even worse? Sarah and I had just had a baby. A beautiful little girl who I thought was the beginning of a new chapter in our life. While I was knee-deep in diapers and late-night feedings, exhausted from work and doing my best to be a father, my wife was sneaking around with my best friend. It was the ultimate betrayal. Meanwhile, Lucy, Dennis' wife, had been going through her own hell. She had been trying to get pregnant for years, and they'd been having issues. Health problems, complications, the kind of struggles that weigh heavy on a marriage. And while she was dealing with that heartbreak, Dennis was off having an affair with my wife. It's like a twisted kind of cruelty, isn't it? Lucy wanted nothing more than to have a child, and Dennis, instead of being there for her, was running off with Sarah. And me, I thought I was doing everything right. I was there for Sarah, supporting her, trying to build a life for our daughter, all while completely oblivious to the lies I was living in. I don't know what's worse, the affair itself or the fact that they let it go on for so long, while Lucy and I tried to keep our lives together. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just break your heart. It makes you question everything. Every memory, every smile, every moment of happiness. I started to wonder if any of it was real. It was like drowning. The more I tried to make sense of it, the more I felt myself sinking. The weight of the lies, the deceit, and the humiliation was suffocating. When the affair came to light, I felt like my entire world had come crashing down, but nothing compared to the moment I decided to do a DNA test. That's when the real nightmare began. The pain was unbearable, a sharp, gut-wrenching agony that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. The results were clear. The child I had been raising, the daughter I had loved and cared for, wasn't mine. It was Dennis. I can't even begin to describe what it felt like to read those words, to hold that piece of paper in my hands and realize that everything I had believed was a lie. It wasn't just the betrayal of my wife. It was the betrayal of fatherhood, of my future. I thought I was building a life, a family, and instead, I had been living someone else's story. Lucy, she took it worse than anyone. When I told her, it was like watching someone's soul break right in front of me. She had already been through so much with her own struggles to have a child, and now, to find out her husband had fathered a child with my wife, it was too much for her to handle. She had a complete nervous breakdown. There was no other way to describe it. It was as if the weight of everything finally crushed her. She was hospitalized for weeks. Depression hit her hard. She wouldn't eat, wouldn't talk, wouldn't even recognize the people around her. It was terrifying. I, along with her family, tried our best to support her, to pull her out of the dark place she had fallen into. Slowly, after what felt like an eternity, she started to recover. It took so much time and patience, but bit by bit, we managed to bring her back to life, though the scars of what happened were still raw, still bleeding. Once she was stable enough, we sent her to a sanatorium with her mother, hoping the peace and quiet would help her regain her strength. She needed space to breathe, to heal. The whole ordeal had taken so much out of her, and I knew that staying here, surrounded by the memories and pain, wasn't helping. As for me, by that time, I had already checked out of my marriage in every way possible. My relationship with Sarah, if you could even call it that anymore, was dead. The love, the trust, everything we had built had crumbled. I couldn't bring myself to live with her or even talk to her. I ignored her calls, deleted her texts without reading them, and mentally, I had locked that chapter of my life away. I didn't care to confront her or dig deeper into the reasons why she did what she did. For me, it was over. The betrayal had been too deep, too destructive to ever consider rebuilding anything. I moved out and never looked back, telling myself that one day I'd officially end things. But for the time being, I needed space. So, while Lucy was recovering, I was preparing myself for the inevitable, closing that door for good. It felt like the only way to move forward was to cut ties completely, to start over, but even that seemed like an impossible task. How do you rebuild when everything has already been taken from you? Nearly a year had passed since I had last stepped foot in the house that used to be our home. But this time, I returned with a purpose. It wasn't to reconcile or to try and salvage anything from the wreckage of my broken marriage. No, I was there to end it once and for all. I was there for the final conversation and to settle things through a divorce that had been a long time coming. I remember the look on Sarah's face when I walked in. It was a mix of resignation and fear, as if she knew this day would come but still wasn't prepared for it. I didn't mince words. I told her straight up that there was no going back. Whatever had once tied us together, love, trust, commitment, it was all gone. There was no hope of rebuilding anything between us. Divorce was inevitable, and I made it clear I wouldn't be paying alimony for a child that wasn't mine. I was ready to take it as far as I needed to. If it meant dragging the whole thing through court, filing appeals, and dealing with endless paperwork, so be it. But I wasn't going to carry the burden of fatherhood for someone else's child. I wasn't going to let my name be attached to that chapter of my life any longer. I demanded that she and the child drop my last name. I wanted a clean break. No lingering ties, no reminders of the betrayal that had torn my life apart. It wasn't just about legality for me. It was about reclaiming my identity, severing any connection to a woman who had shattered my trust and the friend who had betrayed me. To my surprise, Sarah didn't fight me on it. She didn't argue or try to convince me otherwise. She just nodded, defeated, accepting my terms without a word of protest. Maybe she realized there was no point in arguing, or maybe she was just too exhausted to fight anymore. Either way, she agreed. And as for Dennis, the so-called friend who had taken my wife and fathered her child, the man who had been a part of my life for so many years, who had shared countless memories and experiences with me, had turned out to be nothing but a coward. When things got tough, when the weight of his actions started catching up with him, he fled. He claimed it was for work, some transfer to the other side of the country, but I knew better. He was running, plain and simple, running from the mess he'd created, from the responsibility he should have faced head-on. He left Sarah and his own child behind, hiding behind excuses and false pretenses. It was ironic, really. The man who had stolen my wife, the man who had been at the center of this entire catastrophe, didn't even have the courage to stick around and deal with the fallout. In the end, he proved to be nothing more than a spineless coward, disappearing into the distance and leaving both of us to clean up the mess he had helped create. Standing there in what used to be our living room, I realized that I was the only one left facing the wreckage head-on. But strangely, it gave me a sense of closure. Sarah's acceptance, Dennis's cowardice, it all confirmed what I had known deep down for a long time. There was nothing left here for me. The ties that had once bound us were gone, and I was finally free to move on, to rebuild without looking back. My wife was utterly shattered by it all. Her lover had vanished into thin air, running from responsibility while I had walked away, leaving her to pick up the pieces of a life we once shared. According to her sister, Sarah fell into a deep, dark depression. It was the kind of sadness that seeps into every corner of your being, making everything feel meaningless. There were rumors of suicide attempts, several. In fact, her family rallied around her, trying to help her claw her way back from the edge, to hold on to something, anything, to pull her through the void she found herself in. But I wasn't unscathed either. If I'm being honest, I barely survived those days. The betrayal gnawed at me, like a slow poison, eating away at whatever was left of my strength. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My mind was constantly running, replaying the events over and over, trying to make sense of it, but there was no sense to be found. I lost over 20 kilos, watching myself waste away, as though the weight of the emotional wreckage was physically pulling me down. I remember thinking, more than once, that this whole situation had taken years off my life, and I wouldn't be surprised if it had. Every nerve in my body was stretched thin. Every day felt like another battle just to keep going. It's strange how pain transforms you, how it leaves you hollow, a shell of who you used to be. You think you know yourself, and then something like this happens, and you realize how fragile everything is. I'd never imagined I'd be the guy who couldn't get out of bed, who struggled just to function. But that's who I became for a long time. At this point in my life, I live alone. My days are simple, filled with work and the occasional escape into my little hobbies, small joys that give me a sense of peace. But I'm not entirely alone in this. Lucy, who has been through her own trials, remains a close friend. Our bond is stronger than ever, forged in the fires of what we both endured. She's one of the few people who truly understands, and we talk often. It's strange how life twists things around. In the end, Lucy is one of the only people from that chapter of my life who stayed. As for my ex-wife, well, her sister keeps me in the loop from time to time. Apparently, she's now on her second marriage, and it's not exactly the picture of bliss she might have imagined. Her new husband is, from what I hear, a serial womanizer, constantly cheating but unwilling to let go of the marriage. It seems ironic, almost karmic, that she now finds herself on the other side of betrayal. She's got 2 kids now, one with her current husband, but their youngest is often ill. She's in and out of hospitals with the little one, while the older child, my ex-daughter, if you could call her that, is left with the grandparents. Her new husband doesn't care much for her firstborn. To him, she's someone else's child, and he treats her accordingly, which is to say, with indifference. Happiness, it seems, eludes her. The life she once had with me, as broken as it became, has turned into something much worse. But honestly, I feel nothing about it. No satisfaction, no vindication, just indifference. Her choices led her there, and she's living with the consequences. As for my former best friend, the one who shattered the foundations of our lives, he's vanished. No one knows where he is or what he's up to, and frankly, I couldn't care less. His chapter in my life is closed, and I have no desire to ever reopen it. Now, Lucy, she's another story. After everything she went through, she found happiness again. She met a good man, someone who treats her the way she always deserved, and they've started a family. She finally became a mother, something I know she had longed for. She's radiant, happy, and it brings me some comfort to see her thriving after all the heartache. Her husband's a good guy too, and we've become friends. They both try, every now and then, to nudge me towards finding someone new, but the truth is, I don't want it. I've had enough. I've seen what love can do, how easily it can turn into something else, something painful, and I'm just not interested in going through it again. I'm content with my solitude for now. The scars are still there, and I've learned to live with them, but the desire to open up again, it's gone. And that's where I stand, alone, but not lonely. Life isn't perfect, but it's peaceful, and that's more than enough for me now.